Welcome to Zoom In, Zoom Out, where we look at how news about Taiwan is impacting the world. I'm Betty Chen. Taiwanese waters is home to 1/3 of the global coral species. However, this incredible biodiversity is at risk. According to research, 99% of the corals will be beyond recovery if the global temperatures rises by 1.5 degrees Celsius. So what will the scientists in Taiwan do to help save the world's coral reefs? Today on World Ocean Day, we're honored to have invited Mr. Shashank Keshavmurthy. He is doing his postdoctoral research at Academia Sinica's Biodiversity Center. And over the last 23 years, he's been researching the coral reefs around the Pacific Ocean. So Shashank, welcome to our show.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Betty. Hi.
So before we start our discussion, we're going to play a video clip by TaiwanPlus reporter Eric Gao, and he will introduce Taiwan's resilience and efforts in order to protect the coral reefs. Let's have a look.
As if responding to some unspoken signal, coral begin to spawn in the waters off southern Taiwan. Somehow, without any way to communicate, the coral release gametes all at the same time. Scientists don't know the mechanism, but they can predict roughly when it'll happen.
Usually, they spawn from 5 nights to 8 nights after full moon in April, May, June in Green Island.
The current theory? Scientists think the synchronized spawning has a lot to do with differences in light levels with the full moon and the dark period that follows. Scientists are now seeing if they can recreate these conditions artificially.
就是做些模拟的光，在实验室里面去照这些珊瑚，再看看它们会不会产卵。
So Shashank, we just saw some research that happens around the world about corals in Taiwan. But why is this so important, say, to fisheries, to government, or to average people like us?
I think it's important due to its economic importance. So, now, although coral reefs occupy only 0.1% of the ocean floor, but the ecosystems built by corals provide habitat for at least quarter of known marine species. It means roughly 1 to 9 million species live in and around warm water coral ecosystems. So in terms of food, income, recreation, coastal protection, cultural settings, and they impact almost 500 million people in 90 countries around the world, And the global asset value of coral ecosystem, if you want to put a number to it, it's about 1 trillion with economic value in goods and services, and then it exceeds almost 375 billion annually. So this is the reason why it's very important to have a healthy coral reef ecosystem for any coastal nations.
So thank you so much, Shashank, and for sharing us all these important numbers. So what will happen if all corals die? You talk about the economic side and cultural side. What if there is no coral reefs?
We lose the biodiversity. Most of the fishes you see, or any other marine organisms are surrounded and live in and around coral reefs. We lose that. And the most important is the local sustainable, the livelihood of people, because most of the people in coastal nations depend on the protein source from the coral reef. So, and then there's tourism, of course. So all this is combined, and for those islands or atolls which are in the ocean, the coral reefs also protect them from storm surges or typhoons by acting as a barrier, physical barrier. So they prevent land erosion or the erosion of those islands. So this is important thing of coral reef.
So indeed, corals and coral reefs are really important. But why are corals dying in Taiwan or in other parts of the world?
What we are seeing as coral bleaching is because of climate change. Mainly the seawater temperature is increasing through time. It's not that the seawater temperature has not been increasing, but in past few decades, the intensity and severity of increase in seawater temperature is so high that it's difficult for corals to catch up with that kind of increase in seawater temperature. For example, in 2020, corals in Taiwan suffered large-scale coral bleaching, almost 30% island-wide. That means all the outlying islands, including every Penghu, Green Island, Liudao, Xiaoliuqiu, and the northern Taiwan and Kenting National Park. That's because of lack of typhoons. Recently, maybe like 5 or 6 years, typhoons really coming to Taiwan has decreased, and that will increase the seawater temperature. Yeah, they just pass by or they escape Taiwan, you know. That means the summer temperature will increase of the seawater, and this will make it more hotter, and then that will increase bleaching, and that's what we see. Although corals bleach, they have capacity to recover, but the problem is continuous or intense or frequent high temperature episodes. That is the most dangerous part of the present situation.
Yeah, so thank you for mentioning these factors. My follow-up question is, you talk about the bleached corals and you talk about recovery. So what's the recovery process, or what can we do more to help them recover?
It's natural recovery. So when corals bleach, that doesn't mean that coral die, you know. And if the conditions return to normal, they can actually recover back slowly. But if the seawater temperature or the, you know, those stress like habitat destruction, tourism, all the pressure keep continuing after they become bleached, then the recovery process becomes impossible or very slow, that they eventually die. So what we are seeing now is that maybe 100 years ago or 200 years ago, corals still bleach, but the intensity or severity or the destruction or the pressure was not so high, so they had chance to recover. They can recover in few weeks or few months, but now it's not possible because we are giving too much pressure to them.
Right, so thank you for sharing with us about these valuable information. So now we're going to zoom out a little bit. So now we're going to look at the global factors that are contributing to coral bleaching everywhere. Our reporter Sally Jensen has the story.
Coral bleaching, droughts, unprecedented wildfires, and polar ice melt. These events could lead to famine and displacement for millions of people around the world. And what's behind these changes? In large part, the rapid heating of the Earth's oceans. Daily global average sea surface temperatures are currently higher than ever observed, and this could have catastrophic consequences. Even small changes in ocean temperatures mean massive impacts on coral, impacting the whole marine food chain. Over 3 billion people rely on seafood for at least a fifth of their protein. Burning fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas releases greenhouse gases, which heat up the atmosphere. 90% of that excess heat is absorbed by the oceans. And natural events could soon make things worse. El Niño is a phenomenon where ocean temperatures heat up. Climate scientists are predicting that El Niño will hit later this year. This, combined with excess greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, could have devastating results.
That was Sally Jensen from TaiwanPlus News. For the full report, please visit TaiwanPlus website. So Shashank, now we're going to zoom out a little bit. You just talked about climate change and also human factors. What is more dangerous to the corals, or they're equally dangerous?
It's kind of synergistic effect. So as I say, seawater temperature due to climate change is not only increasing, the temperatures are increasing, but also the intensity and frequency is also increasing. So that means we have more and more episodes of high seawater temperature in summer. That means we have bleaching events around the world. But it's also synergistic effect of overfishing, habitat destruction, pollution, and all the human effect, the tourism, all these things combined, it will actually add on to the already weakened corals because of the temperature stress. So there is a lot of combination happening. But at the same time, we need to remember that temperature is the most important factor for what is happening. So that means we need to work something to do reduce the carbon emissions or bring the temperatures down.
Indeed. So according to your research, one of the most important things for you is to find one species of the coral that can survive rising ocean temperatures. Could you please tell us a bit more about that?
I think you're talking this about what the work we did in Kenting National Park using one of the coral species. We have been working on multiple coral species. The reason is because the Kenting National Park, as we know, has a nuclear power plant which is built right on the coral reef, and it releases a lot of hot water through the outlet. That means the shallow the corals living in the shallow waters up to 4 meters, they have been continuously experiencing hot water from almost 30 years or 35 years when the nuclear power plant was built. This has made those corals living in that shallow areas near the nuclear power plant become either acclimatized to that hot water or adapted to that hot water. So, of course, we showed example of one coral species, but there are many coral species which are living in the shallow waters which have, been surviving there in those hot conditions, about 2 to 3 degrees higher than the adjacent locations. Now, this 2 to 3 degree higher temperature is similar to what will happen in 2050. So, we are using the nuclear power plant location as a mesocosm, the natural mesocosm study to see in this present time how the future corals will behave with that increase in temperature in 2050 or by end of the century.
It's good to know that there are more than one species that can survive and in this kind of environment. So my next question is, given a situation, you talk about a rising ocean temperature, so what can the government or the civil society do together to address this issue?
It's a very complicated situation. It involves both socioeconomics and psychology. In terms of socioeconomics, because most of the locations where coral reefs are located in Taiwan is also a tourism area. That means the local people depend on the tourists for their survival and for their livelihood. Whatever policy government brings, that means it will be in direct conflict with the local people who depend on the tourism. But then it's also, as I say, it's a lot of money is involved. For example, I can tell you, when I arrived in Taiwan in 2008, Kenting was the most popular tourism destination with almost 5 to 6 million people visiting in certain years. How much pressure that puts to the local environment and the diversity of the coral reefs. But that's also the point, right? So it's difficult, but they're happy. For example, Palau has a rule that when you exit Palau, you have to pay $100 tax, the environment tax, and everyone pays. Yes, everyone pays, and the Palau government used that $100 for the conservation of coral reefs in Palau. This kind of things can be done, and certain countries have done that. The other thing can be done is the total ban of people entering any location, because as I say, coral reefs can recover, and then if there is a destruction of coral reefs, it takes around 5 to 10 years for them to recover and get back to the normal condition. But this cannot happen because of the policies which government cannot implement because of the socio-economic problem.
So like what you said, it's really important to raise public awareness, not just at home, but also internationally. And we definitely need to see more efforts made in this area. So
the other part is psychology. I have seen people in Taiwan, or this is the case everywhere. Like they think that if they volunteer to some environmental cause or donate to some environmental cause, they think that their job is done. That means they are, taking part in the conservation process. But that's not the point. The point is every individual has to start change from themselves. They need to contribute to the change. Only then the government can implement the policy. It's not a dictatorship. They need to think that if the environment is degraded, if Taiwan has no coral reefs, that means no fish, that means no protein, that means nothing to protect our coast from typhoons or storms. That means our future generations cannot live. And this has to be long-term psychological thinking. So that is everyone's responsibility. Everyone's responsibility, yeah. So that's all the time we have for today. Shashank, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. No worries. Thank you so much. So this has been Zoom In, Zoom Out. You can find us on Facebook or Twitter. Thank you and stay safe. See you next time.